Derrick Rose has retired. Wow. RIP to my childhood, man, because I grew up on Derrick Rose. The only reason I became a fan of the Chicago Bulls was because of how much I loved watching Derrick Rose play. And you can't tell me that if he never had those knee injuries early into his career, that he wouldn't have won a championship, man. He, in my opinion, is one of the most dominant point guards to ever play this game when he was fully healthy prior to the injuries, man. His explosiveness, his ability to cut to the basket, finish with explosive dunks, layups. Derrick Rose was just a very fun player to watch in his prime. And once the Chicago Bulls got rid of him, it was really hard for me to remain a fan of the Bulls franchise because outside of D Rose, the next greatest thing they had after him was Jimmy Butler, and they traded him to the Timberwolves for Zach LaVine. When I think of the Chicago Bulls, the two players that come to mind are Michael Jordan and Derrick Rose. He probably is the second most recognizable Chicago Bulls player of all time, man. It's just really sad to think of the career that Derrick Rose could have had if he never had the injuries. But even despite having those knee injuries, I still believe he deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. I can't think of the NBA without mentioning Derrick Rose. And that's what the Hall of Fame is for. The Hall of Fame is supposed to commemorate some of the greatest players to ever play your sport. And you can't tell the story of the NBA and the Chicago Bulls in the 2010s without mentioning D Rose, the youngest MVP in NBA history, one of the most athletically gifted point guards that ever played the sport of basketball. You know what's funny? I feel like I'm 80 years old, but I'm only 22 because D Rose has been playing ball for so long that it's just weird to think of him now being retired. And there's so many NBA players that I've grown up watching, like CP3, Blake Griffin, that now are so old that you see them as analysts on ESPN now. That's so crazy. CP3 being an analyst is something I never would have thought I would be old enough to see. And with the retirement of Derrick Rose, man, I just feel so sad right now. Like when I saw the news pop up on my phone, I didn't want to believe it. And he posted some video on his Instagram page last night. He called it the Renaissance. And I was like, man, D Rose, I know you're not about to hang it up, my dude. You gotta give it at least 2 more years. There are certain players that you watch, regardless of the sport, basketball, football, that you have so much admiration for that you never want to see them hang it up until they win the championship. And it just feels like the career of Derrick Rose is incomplete since he doesn't have a ring. And he definitely belongs in that conversation of being one of the greatest players to retire without a championship. Because if it wasn't for those knee injuries, he would have got a ring over LeBron James' Miami Heat squads. As good as what those teams were, Derrick Rose was their biggest competition in the East. Could we agree? When LeBron was down in South Beach and you had the big three with him, Dwayne Wade, and Chris Bosh, the only team that was giving them a run for their money during that time was the Derrick Rose-led Chicago Bulls squads. And once he got injured, the East just became a cakewalk for Miami with LBJ down there. So I think that Derrick Rose is one of the better players that ever put on a Chicago Bulls jersey. Probably got to be second best all time behind Michael Jordan. They got to retire his number. And I don't know how y'all feel about this, but I just felt a certain kind of way when I saw the Bulls post Derrick Rose. And I was just like, man, you posting this dude, but you got rid of him. You gave up on a hometown kid. I just would never respect how the Chicago Bulls went about treating Derrick Rose. Once he got out of his prime, it's not like he was garbage. He was still good enough to give you 17, 18 points a game. I just can't get over how they treated Derrick Rose. There are certain players that you don't trade, you don't cut, because they're a cornerstone of your franchise. And just to get rid of a dude like Derrick Rose, somebody that grew up in the Windy City, somebody that put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into that organization, just still doesn't sit right with me till this day. And I'm just more hurt about the decision the Bulls made to get rid of Derrick Rose than even Jimmy Butler. That was a really hurtful decision that they made, but I'm always going to remember when Derrick Rose made that shot to win the game in that playoff series. I believe it was against Miami. It hit the backboard, went into the hoop. I got so many great memories of Derrick Rose that despite him not finishing off his career as a Chicago Bull, in my heart, he always is forever going to be a Bull. When I think of Derrick Rose, I think of him in a Chicago Bulls uniform. Don't know how you guys view Derrick Rose, but I've always considered him a Bulls, even when he wasn't playing for them, man, because that's really, the moments that you think of that have defined D Rose's career. Of course, he had a couple of other good moments outside of when he was playing for Chicago, but D Rose to me is a Bulls legend, the second greatest player in franchise history, and it's just sad to be talking about the retirement of Derrick Rose because I just feel so old, man. I was like 10 years old when I became a fan of the Chicago Bulls. I remember reading the books that they used to sell at the book fair at school and always getting the NBA ones that had Derrick Rose on the cover. Definitely one of my favorite, not just basketball players of all time, but one of my favorite athletes of all time, just because I respect the resilience. After that second knee injury, he easily could have retired. He could have gave it up, but he came back, kept on pushing, and I just respect the dedication that Derrick Rose had to the game of basketball, and I got a lot of respect for his career, especially when he was playing for the Bulls. If it wasn't for injuries, he would have been an NBA champion, and his career probably would be viewed a lot better than how it's viewed now, because most people, when they think about Derrick Rose, you think about what could have been if he stayed healthy instead of actually honoring and showing respect to what his career still was, even with the injuries. It's like you had two eras of Derrick Rose. You had pre-injury Derrick Rose and you had post-injury Derrick Rose. And post-injury Derrick Rose wasn't as good as, the healthy version, but he still was a damn good basketball player and he still had a fantastic career. So shout out to Derrick Rose for all of the years that he put into his NBA career. And I'm sad to see you go, my boy. Like, this one definitely hurts. It's definitely a dagger to the heart. But like this video, subscribe, turn on post notifications if you're new. We're not a basketball channel. We are a diehard football channel. We post NFL, college football content daily, 24/7 throughout the year. But I just wanted to come on here and show my respects to the second greatest player to ever put on the Chicago Bulls uniform. Enjoy retirement, D Rose. Sad to see you leave the game.